Welcome to this deep dive where we take fascinating sources and really try to pull out the knowledge you need quickly and hopefully entertainingly.
And today we're getting into some really profound material. It's excerpts from In the Greater World, which comes to us from the spirit André Luiz through Francisco Cândido Xavier's psychography.
Right, and these aren't just theories, are they? I mean, the book presents them as actual spiritual observations, insights into what happens after we leave the physical world.
Exactly. They're presented as factual accounts of experiences in, a spiritual dimension, looking at how interconnected everything is.
It really does make you stop and think. I mean, every single day, just huge numbers of people transition from every culture, every background imaginable.
And they all carry, as the text suggests, their own unique spiritual baggage, their beliefs, their life experiences. It's an incredibly diverse group arriving, wherever they arrive.
Which brings us right to the core questions for this deep dive. Based on these sources, questions I think a lot of us have.
Definitely. Like, what actually happens right after we leave the physical body? Are there different states of consciousness, different kinds of experiences?
And crucially, how do our actions, our thoughts, everything we do here, how does that shape what comes next? Our spiritual path, you know?
Yeah. And one theme that comes up again and again in these excerpts is this need for inner work, for spiritual growth.
It really pushes back against any idea of just like coasting into some perfect afterlife without any effort, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The message is pretty clear. Spiritual progress isn't automatic. It's not guaranteed just because you, say, belong to a certain religion or believed certain things.
There's this emphasis on understanding what the sources call divine law and actively working on ourselves. No shortcuts.
No easy rewards just handed out. It suggests you've got to earn that spiritual advancement through genuine effort and understanding.
Okay, so for you listening, wanting to get the essence of this without wading through everything, these sources definitely give you a lot to chew on about life and what might follow. Where should we start digging in?
Let's begin with what the sources call the journey of souls. It's noted that when people demand the country of death, as the text puts it, relatively few seem to have lived lives focused on what's termed sublimation.
Sublimation, meaning like focusing on higher spiritual goals, improving yourself through noble actions.
Pretty much, yeah. Living beyond just the immediate material concerns. And the text is quite direct about those who don't.
It really is. It criticizes people who get caught up in worldly status, titles, possessions, calling them minors of spirit.
Right, people who might indulge in various vices, maybe feel entitled, yet still think of themselves as somehow chosen for a special afterlife.
It makes you wonder what their expectations actually are. If you're focused on the material, what do you think happens when that's gone?
Well, that's part of the critique. It addresses those with purely materialistic beliefs who might expect everything to just be wiped clean, or those who assume religious affiliation alone acts like a VIP pass.
Like just showing up with your membership card guarantees entry.
Kind of, yeah. The text points out the inconsistency of being deeply attached to the material or relying solely on group identity, and then expecting automatic spiritual rewards or a clean slate without personal merit.
So you end up with this massive, diverse caravan of souls, all arriving with different ideas, different baggage. The big question the text raises is, where does everyone go? Is there some common destination?
That leads nicely into the next point, the illusions of the afterlife. The sources talk about the disappointment faced by souls who expected, basically, a heaven of contemplative joys.
Like an eternal retirement community. Yeah. Just bliss and maybe some divine entertainment, no effort required.
Exactly that, effortless beatitude. But that's contrasted sharply with the reality described in the higher spiritual spheres.
Which involves?
Active assistance, service, meaningful work. It suggests that real spiritual fulfillment isn't about passive reception, it's about contribution. About engaging and helping.
Like the satisfaction you get from doing something worthwhile, not just receiving.
Precisely. That principle seems to extend right into the spiritual dimensions described here.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The moon. I found the description of the moon really striking. This solitary and alvinitant presence.
Yeah, the moon is presented almost as a character, a silent witness that's observed Earth's entire history. Civilizations rising, falling, the endless cycles of life and death.
This luminous disk, watching over everything, influencing things silently.
And its calmness, its august serenity is used as a symbol. It reflects the inexpugnable tranquility of the divine law.
So it's like this constant calm backdrop.
Exactly. A backdrop to our human drama, our hope and inquietude, whether we're incarnate or discarnate, always learning, always evolving between these states.
While we're down here rushing around, worrying, hoping,
Yeah.
the moon just hangs there, reflecting this unchanging divine order. That's quite an image.
It is powerful. Now, related to that divine order, there's the theme of spiritual assistance and motivation.
This is about spiritual guides, right?
Yeah.
Helping people out.
Yes, dedicated guides who apparently descend, come down to the physical plane, specifically to help those who are genuinely seeking spiritual growth.
Even if the person seeking help isn't, like, spiritually advanced enough to meet them halfway, the guides come to them.
That's the idea. It shows a real commitment. And their work often involves immediate, practical aid for people in deep moral distress.
Like preventing really negative outcomes. Suicide is mentioned.
Yes, intervening in crises like that. It requires, the text says, deep knowledge of psychic forces, the power of thoughts and emotions, and a real dedication. Think of it as a kind of spiritual emergency service.
A spiritual first response team.
Okay.
And what about sleep? The sources suggest it's more than just physical rest.
Definitely. Sleep is described as a time when our spirit temporarily separates from the body. And during this separation, people often gather in the spiritual realm.
With help from benevolent guides or helpers.
That's right. And these gatherings aren't just social calls, they're for preparation.
Preparation for what?
For longer and more efficient incursions in superior spirituality. So it's like a nightly spiritual boot camp, getting us ready for deeper experiences.
Wow. It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Are we actually aware of this opportunity when we sleep? Are we making the most of it, or are we just out cold?
That's the question it raises. Are we just snoring through potential soul growth? Which leads to the idea that the transition itself from physical to spiritual isn't instantaneous magic.
It's not like flipping a switch and suddenly you're an enlightened spiritual being.
Not according to these texts. It takes effort, refinement, sometimes even suffering is part of the process. It's gradual transformation, not a sudden miracle, more like honing a craft.
Okay, this next concept really grabbed me. The mental house. Can you break that down?
Sure. It's a metaphor for our mind structure. Imagine a house with 3 floors.
Okay.
The first floor, maybe the basement or ground floor, is the residence of automatic impulses. That's our subconscious, our instincts, habits, all the stuff from the past stored away.
Got it. The automatic pilot stuff.
Exactly. Then the second floor is the domicile of current conquests. This is our conscious mind, our present awareness, our efforts, our willpower, where we're actively working on things now. The main living area.
Where we make choices and try to improve, and the top floor.
The third floor, maybe the attic or a study, is the house of superior notions. This represents our superconscious mind, our ideals, aspirations, connection to higher insights, our future potential, the highest vision of ourselves.
So mental imbalance then.
Yeah.
The text describes it as a fall.
Yeah, like falling from the upper floor's reason and ideals down into the basement of instinct and uncontrolled impulses when our lower nature takes over our higher judgment.
That makes a lot of sense visually. And this connects to the impact of our thoughts and emotions too, right?
Absolutely. The texts argue that negative thoughts, say, a persistent desire for revenge, aren't just fleeting ideas. They can actually cling to our psychic organization, our whole mental, emotional being, like sticky residue.
Affecting our well-being even after physical death.
Precisely. The example given is stark. A murderer who, despite having outward success, a family, material comfort, is still psychically haunted, pursued by the victim's presence. Our inner state persists.
Wow. So external circumstances don't erase the internal reality. The text even mentions a kind of spiritual chemistry in the brain.
Yes, suggesting different brain regions are linked to these different functions: memory, instinct, higher thought. It implies a really deep link between the physical brain and our spiritual or mental structure. They're intertwined.
So if our spirit is always evolving, moving forward, why don't we usually remember our past lives clearly? Seems like that would be useful information.
That's a great question. The sources explain it using the idea of the physical brain having an amortizing function.
Amortizing, like paying off a debt gradually.
Sort of. Think of it more like a dimmer switch for past life memories. It dials down the intensity so we're not overwhelmed by potentially thousands of years of experiences all at once.
Ah, okay. So it helps us focus on this life, the lessons we need to learn right now.
That seems to be the idea. But crucially, the tendencies, the skills, the deep-seated inclinations we developed across those lives, those are retained. They're part of our current makeup.
Which could explain innate talents or fears that don't seem connected to this life's experiences.
Exactly. Now, back to the mental house. What happens if we get stuck, focusing too much on just one floor?
Like living entirely in the basement of impulses or only in the attic of ideals.
Right. The sources say that leads to imbalance. Too much focus on impulses means wasted energy. Too much on just mechanical effort, the second floor, without higher purpose, leads to a meaningless routine.
And too much time dreaming in the attic, the third floor, without actually doing anything based on those ideals.
That leads to fruitless contemplation, inaction. And in the spiritual world, these imbalances apparently attract like-minded, similarly unbalanced individuals. Balance is key.
So it's about integrating all three floors, using the wisdom from the past, first floor, applying effort in the present, second floor, guided by our highest ideals, third floor.
That's the goal, using past learning for present action towards future aspirations, a harmonious mental house.
Okay, now the texts provide a really moving example of transformation through love with Sister Cipriana.
Ah, yes, that's a powerful story. She steps into a situation in the spiritual realm between a murderer and his victim, who is relentlessly pursuing him.
And just her words, her tone, described as having an inflection of cariño, that tenderness, it changes everything.
It does. The pursuer, who was cold and vengeful, is moved to tears. It just shows the incredible power of genuine love and compassion to break through even the hardest shells of anger and pain.
It's such a potent illustration of interconnectedness. The crime, the consequence, but also the potential for redemption offered through divine compassion manifested as love.
A shift in energy,
A beautiful example of transformative empathy. And this leads into the perspective on suffering.
which, as we usually think of it, is something to be avoided, but these texts see it differently. Yes, suffering is often presented not as random punishment, but as a necessary part of spiritual growth, like a potter needing fire to strengthen clay, or a sculptor needing a hammer and chisel.
Tools for refinement.
Potentially. But the key is our reaction. Suffering can push us towards enlightenment, towards growth. Or, if we react with bitterness and resistance, it can lead to further descent. Our attitude is the deciding factor.
So it's about how we respond to hardship.
Okay?
Another powerful force discussed is maternal love.
Immensely powerful. The story of Candida and her daughter Julieta really highlights this. Candida's prayers and loving thoughts have a tangible influence, even though Julieta is struggling, living a life quite different from her upbringing.
Julieta's internal conflict was creating heavy vibrations,
Yeah.
right, affecting her health.
Yes, the idea is that a mind in conflict, pulling in different directions, generates destructive forces that harm the individual first, like an internal civil war.
And while spiritual help, magnetic assistance, could offer some relief.
It couldn't just erase the consequences of Julieta's choices. She still had to navigate that. But Candida's love remained a constant supportive force.
Even at the very end of Candida's life, her peaceful passing and that final gesture.
Symbolically joining Julieta's hand with her partner Paulino's, it underscores that deep familial love and concern that persists beyond death.
Which brings us to situations where maybe earthly science reaches its limits, like the case of the child with a severe mental condition.
Right. A situation where, the text suggests, conventional treatments offer little benefit. It points to the mental plan being just as real and complex as the physical body.
And the mother's struggle. Her prayers, trying to understand why. It's heartbreaking.
It is. But what's highlighted is her eventual acceptance, her profound love for her child despite the condition. A kind of spiritual strength emerges.
And this ties into the view of family again.
As a spiritual reunion in time, yes,
Yeah.
and the home as a potential sanctuary. When family members unite with noble purpose, the connection is incredibly strong. We're journeying together.
Often across lifetimes, it seems, like with Marcelo. He was dealing with echoes from the past.
Yes, his current life was presented as a period of rescue, working through imbalances from previous lives. But the memories, the energetic residue, could still trigger problems.
Physical issues, psychological disturbances,
Yeah.
remnants of old experiences.
Exactly. And the advice given is to seek refuge in noble principles. Prayer, understanding, good deeds to counteract these lingering effects. Our past shapes us, but we can work with it.
It's not just locked away. And Marcelo even had encounters in the spiritual world. Not all pleasant.
No, he encountered some shadowy, troubled entities linked to his past, which really disturbed his equilibrium and sent him back to his physical body quickly. It shows that unresolved conflicts can follow us.
Which gives a different lens for looking at things like mental illness, too.
The spiritual perspective offered suggests that deep mental imbalance often stems from serious past actions, ingrained negative thinking patterns.
Leading to this generalized disorganization of the nervous system.
Potentially, yeah. Driven by persistent remorse, worry, or other strong negative states. While earthly help is valuable, the ultimate healing, from this viewpoint, has to come from the spirit itself, addressing those root causes.
It emphasizes the inner journey of healing. But even in cases that seem very difficult, where maybe full recovery isn't likely in this life, spiritual assistance still has a purpose.
Yes, the goal becomes ensuring a dignified death, providing comfort and support before a complete breakdown. Fabricio is the example here.
His past actions led to decline, but his positive contributions, especially to his family,
Earned him a more peaceful transition. It shows that positive actions always count. They always have weight, even amidst struggles.
And after death, what about redemption? Is there a process?
The texts describe a period of purging, of shedding those negative elements. Reconnecting with family members in future lives often depends on everyone's spiritual progress.
But we're all part of the bigger human family anyway.
Ultimately, yes, the journey involves everyone. We're all interconnected in this larger evolution.
Okay. The sources also address suicide prevention directly, which is so important.
Through the story of Antonina, she's contemplating suicide due to severe hardship, unrequited love, a history of self-sacrifice, leaving her feeling empty and despairing.
Just utterly hopeless.
Yes, and spiritual helpers intervene. They step in not just to prevent the act, but to offer comfort, perspective, guidance. It highlights the critical need for support during such crises.
And reinforces the message that death isn't an escape route from consequences.
Absolutely not. The law of cause and effect, divine law, operates everywhere. Feeling disinherited and unhappy doesn't negate the sublime possibilities that still exist.
Like finding purpose in helping others, even in small ways. Like helping abandoned children, as the text suggests.
Exactly. It's about using whatever resources we do have right now to work towards wisdom and love, not seeking an exit.
Antonina then gets a kind of spiritual timeout, a retreat.
Yes, a temporary removal for rest, spiritual replenishment to regain strength and perspective. But progress isn't always straightforward. People can slip back.
Like Antidio, who relapsed into old negative patterns. Maintaining progress is hard work.
It is, and the sources give us a glimpse into what might look like pleasure in some lower spiritual settings, but actually isn't.
Right, that scene with the dancing and revelry, it looked like fun on the surface.
But it was described as being heavily influenced by troubled, even perverse entities. It wasn't genuine joy, but more like a regression, a connection to primitive states, rejecting higher guidance, deceptive appearances.
And then there's the portrayal of addiction, which is really harrowing.
Deeply distressing. The addicted individual is shown as being almost puppet-like, controlled and exploited by negative entities who are literally feeding off the intoxicating substances through them. It's a stark image of spiritual vampirism.
It really emphasizes a potential spiritual dimension to the struggle. Now, shifting slightly, what about divine protection? Is it tied to specific religions?
Not according to these excerpts. Protection isn't based on labels, but on genuine faith, sincerity, and a positive attitude towards growth. Different religions are seen as just different paths, different levels of understanding the same core truths.
So the focus is always on inner transformation.
Always. There's an account of a gathering focused on spiritual learning where direct magnetic assistance, like a spiritual energy boost, is given to help a struggling medium regain her balance. It's about facilitating that interchange.
Okay, and finally, the texts tackle love, sex, and spiritual evolution. This goes beyond just biology, doesn't it?
Far beyond. In higher spheres, it suggests femininity and masculinity are more about soul characteristics being more passive or receptive versus more active or projective. Fundamental energy dynamics.
Not just physical forms. And love itself evolves.
Yes, it's seen as a journey, starting perhaps with desire, moving through possession, then sympathy, devotion, eventually reaching selfless, divine love. It's a path towards balance and union.
And the essence of love is infinite, existing beyond just physical affection.
Absolutely. It's the fundamental creative force, which connects to the idea that all beings possess this creative impulse, inherited from the divine. Even psychology's focus on sex drive, or the drive for importance, is seen through this lens.
So even mistakes, negative actions, they're part of learning, part of the journey.
In the long run, yes. They contribute to gaining experience, ultimately pushing us, sometimes painfully, towards light, peace, wisdom, and love. It's a vast perspective.
Which really underscores the need for a more holistic view, doesn't it? One that includes the spiritual dimension, reincarnation. Things often missed by purely materialistic viewpoints.
Precisely. Without that broader context, the picture remains incomplete, according to these sources.
Wow, that was quite a journey through these ideas. We've covered a lot. Let's try and pull together some of the main takeaways for you, the listener.
I think the strongest thread running through all of this is the profound link between our life here and what comes next. Our thoughts, our actions, our intentions, they really matter. They create our ongoing reality.
Yeah, it's not like wiping the slate clean. And spiritual growth isn't passive. It demands effort, learning, actively engaging with life and its lessons. It's a continuous journey.
And it's about striving to understand and align with these divine laws. Rather than just hoping for an easy ride or an automatic reward, the responsibility really lies with each of us.
Definitely. For me, some of the really sticky ideas were the mental house metaphor. Such a useful way to think about our inner landscape and that image of the moon, the silent witness, reminding us of a bigger picture, a deeper order.
Those were powerful. And for you, listening, wanting quick yet deep insights, these sources offer a truly unique lens on who we are, why we're here, and the vast journey we seem to be on. It goes way beyond surface-level ideas about the afterlife.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. How does hearing about this perspective, the mental house, the impact of our thoughts, the ongoing journey, the power of love, how does it make you think about your own life now, your own inner state, your aspirations, your path forward, something to definitely mull over?